Sorry about the wait. We were having some technical difficulties, but today's session is going to be over MIP Recording Subledgers. We have Kathy Dwyer, a Senior Application Consultant here at Zobrio, to lead the webinar. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, which is located at the bottom of your screen, and we will go over all of them later. And have a good day. Here you go, Kathy.
Okay. Thank you, Colleen, and welcome all to our monthly Zobrio University for our MIP fund accounting. This morning's this morning's topic is reconciling your subledgers to the GL, and basically, how do you go about finding problems? Okay. For instance, you might run a balance sheet and see a debit or a credit balance in your accounts payable account, or maybe an AR balancing account, and the question is, where is this coming from? What has happened? How can I resolve that? Okay, so that's pretty much the focus. There's a few tips and tricks that we can do in the system to look for out of balance situations. Okay, and just an aside, and when I say out of balance, MIP does not let you post a transaction if it's not balanced. So what ends up happening is oftentimes if you run a report like a balance sheet and it shows you're out of balance, or revenue and expense statement and the numbers don't look great, what we suspect is one of two things. One is perhaps a transaction where one side of the transaction is posted in 1 month, the other side of the transaction is in another month. And technically what I mean by that is you might enter your invoices and they might get posted in the month of July. The cash might be expended in the month of August. Okay, so it's, even though July would have a debit to the expense and a credit to AP, so it's a balanced entry, the cash side occurred with the opposite offset to AP occurs in the following month. So it appears as if you're out of balance, when technically in this instance it's a date issue. Okay. The other thing that could happen that a report might show out of balance is this. I'm going to come in here to reports and come down to financial statements, and I'm going to go to our statement of revenue and expenditures to get started. Okay, and I'm going to just pull up this a standard revenue and expense report. And one of the things that, again, that you want to suspect, that if you run a report that is, you look at it and you go, oh, something's out of whack here. Well, be suspect, in particular if it's a financial report. Your financial reports have these financial statement formats, okay? And they always appear on the Setup tab, and the way you can access them is it's kind of like a hotkey from within the program. You can come up here to this ABC icon. And what that does is it takes us into the financial statement maintenance program. And in this instance, we're looking at a revenue and expense report, but as you can see there, they have balance sheets and statement of financial positions, etc. But what ends up happening here is think of your financial statement as when they say outline, that's truly what they mean. It's like, what do you want your report to look like? It's the left-hand side of the report, and let me expand this just a bit just to show you. So you can see here in this report, the outline is going to have a section for revenues, and below that you have subcategories for grant revenues and contributions and investments. You look at below that, the expense line, there's no subcategory. You don't see a plus sign to drill into. So what ends up happening is our revenue is being broken out into detail categories. Expenses are going to roll into a common or a single line. Okay? And what the concept with these outlines is you can have as many of them as you want. You can tie them to the same report. Basically, you could create a revenue and expense statement that might present one way for your board members. You might run it a separate way, maybe with more detail for yourself as you're auditing through and looking for issues. And you can use the same report with multiple financial statements because what happens with these lines is you actually design the left margin of your reports, and then technically what you do is you assign GL accounts to appear in specific lines. Okay, so here under contributions, if I was to look at what accounts are accumulating there, it's the 41,000 account, which is just you move it from the left to right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this because we're really not going to focus on creating a financial statement format, but rather, again, because a balance sheet also has a financial statement format, if you run a report, in particular a balance sheet, and it shows you you're out of balance, it more than likely is the financial statement format in that maybe a new account was added to the system, but it wasn't added to the particular line you want it to accumulate on the financial statement. Okay. Now, in this instance, let me just go ahead and run this. I'm going to just show you here that we're filtering on the general fund or Fund 1 code. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is basically the idea with this revenue and expense report is really I wanted to come down here in the financial statement report is really giving us a bottom line of revenue over under expenses, if you will. And make note that at this point, the net of the two is the $196,661.97. Okay. Now, in looking at that, you know, there's a couple of different ways that you can look at that number as well. Is if I come over here, let me exit out of here, and let me go run a trial balance report, which those can be found here under reports and under general ledger analysis, and then to the normal trial balance. Okay, I've got a couple of these reports set up, and just simply TB1 and TB2. Okay, and just really what makes these a little bit different is notice here on my filter screen, I still want to just pull Fund 1 because that's what my revenue and expense report did. And then in this instance, when you look, I'm filtering on GL codes, which is basically the numbers that start with 1 through a series of numbers that take me through my equity or net asset account. And the reason I'm going to do that is, let me go ahead and run that to screen, is not creating a full trial balance, but rather just a trial balance that includes my equity accounts. You'll notice in this instance, my balance sheet accounts, you'll notice that the report difference is that same $196,661.97 that we saw on the revenue and expense report. Okay? Now, that makes sense based on the filter that I set, asking for just balance sheet accounts, and as we know, our equity or net asset account is typically, unless there's a direct posting through a journal entry, it only gets updated during a fiscal year close. So because this particular trial balance doesn't include the revenue and expense accounts, I would expect it to be out of balance by the amount of revenue over under expenditures. Okay. So that's one way to look at this and say, okay, there's my balance sheet. This particular entry, 196,661.97, matches my revenue report. Okay. You could also forego or bypass running a revenue and expense report, and basically, let me come back in here one more time, is you could have a trial balance, and let me grab my TB2 report, and the trick is run these for all the same date ranges. Okay. The difference between my trial balance 1 report, which was, again, just balance sheet accounts, is this trial balance 2, which, again, is really just created for looking for problems. We're filtering on the same Fund 1, but this time my general ledger codes, the 4 and starting with the series numbers of 4,000, which are my revenues, all the way through, in this instance, for this database, the 67,100 account. What that's designed to do is run a report that pulls strictly revenue and expense accounts. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and run this, okay, now Again, did we have to run a revenue and expense statement? No, we could have relied strictly on these two trial balances that are filtering differently. But again, notice the total, the 196, 660, 197. With the revenue and expense accounts trial balance, we have this number. For the balance sheet, we have that number. And if we put the two together, they balance themselves back out so that we have a true zero balance at the end of our report. But this helps in the case of looking to see, did my subledger hit my general ledger properly? Did it all occur within the same month? Well, this is a good place to start, just to see, am I out of whack? Do my numbers balance? Okay. So oftentimes these trial balances, and yes, we can take away the filter, quite honestly, and go ahead and run the report. And when we get this report down the bottom, as you can see, it is indeed imbalanced because I didn't cherry pick in the sense that in one instance pull just balance sheet, in another instance pull just my subledger. This is truly pulling a full trial balance. So that's just one kind of tip and trick, if you will, of how you can go about using the trial balance to look for perhaps GL issues. Okay. But again, do keep in mind if you do roll in your financials, you know, I can't say this too much, is you as a user, when you're entering a transaction, you know, if it's a journal entry, if you go to save that journal entry and it's not balanced in the sense debits are equal to credits for the same effective date or within the same fund, system's not going to save that entry. It's just not going to let you save it and post it. So the nice thing about the MIP system is it's catching you at the point of entry so that you're not able, the system's not allowing you to create a problem. But if a problem manifests itself on your reports, once again, suspect that on your financials, your balance sheets, your revenue and expenses, take a look at your financial statement format. Make sure that all your accounts are accounted for. In other words, they're being accumulated into the correct line on the report. Because if you had a balance sheet and you eliminated a cash account from your financial statement, the report's going to show out of balance, but the likelihood that your data is out of balance is very, very minimal. Okay. The other option or opportunity that could cause a problem would be, again, if you're looking at your balance sheet and you see a balance on your accounts payable account, that typically indicates you either have a batch that hasn't been, or let me use the correct term, a session that hasn't been posted yet, or maybe all your sessions have been posted, but what happens is maybe the debit side of the transaction, again, expense offset to AP is in 1 month, credit offset to cash, debit offset to AP could be in a separate month. Therefore, overall your system is balanced, but looking at an individual month, it could be you're sitting there with an AP balance that needs to be resolved. Okay, so those are just a few ideas of why a report might or a system appears out of balance. But again, can't emphasize too much. Really suspect your financial statement formats. Let me tell it not to save that. And worth looking at one more time. Let me come on down here. I'm going to this time go to the balance sheet. And again, you'll see down here it's got a financial statement format. How can I look at that format? I go to the ABC icon. Okay, it defaults in the values of the fact that we're doing a balance sheet report. This is the name of my format, balance sheet internal. When you click your create outline, again, you can always hit the plus sign to expand your categories. And the idea with each one of these categories and lines within the category is you're assigning accounts. And if for any reason you've got accounts listed in the left-hand panel, unless they're inactive or discontinued accounts, if they're not itemized somewhere on this report, whether it belongs under cash or AR or other accrued, or if it's a current year-to-date net income is all the revenue and expense accounts that accumulate. But if you see a value, and let me come back over here. If you see a value or a GL account hanging in the left-hand panel, you want to make sure that you move it to the right-hand panel under the correct line, and that in itself will cause your balance sheet to balance. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is it's probably a reporting issue as opposed to a data issue. All righty. Now, let me tell you just a couple things about the system, too, is we have up here under organization and organization preferences, okay, there is this entry dates tab, okay, and you see a lot of different horizontal lines here because, as we know in MIP, it categorizes the types of transactions. So again, think of each horizontal line as a type of transaction. For instance, the first line, AP invoices, oftentimes you'll run a report and see a reference to the letters API, AP invoice. AP credits is APM. AP checks, APC. So what ends up happening, point being with this table, is you'll notice that there's columns for prohibit to, or warn prior to, or warn after, prohibit after. This is basically the system's way of allowing you to lock down a period of time so that if you've balanced a month, if you've balanced a fiscal year, and you want to prevent somebody from mistakenly picking the wrong date, this table is where you can do that. And it's not a one-time shot. If you happen to lock it down, you've closed a fiscal year, you lock down the date so that people can't mistakenly post to that period. If the auditors come in and they have an adjustment for you, come on in. Come back to this table. You can change the dates long enough to make your correcting journal entry, and then come right back and lock it down. Okay? And it's really a handy way of controlling your system and who can post to what period, which again is a way of keeping the integrity of your data intact. Okay. Now, another tip that I can give you is under activities, okay, you can come down to where it says close fiscal year, and no worries, because it's not going to just take off and start closing your fiscal year. It basically, the reason I wanted to come into this window is because the date that you see here, okay, is basically, it's the last day of your open fiscal year, okay? So when it says it's going to close the fiscal year to close is 12/31/18, this database runs with a fiscal year of January 1st through December 31st. So it's asking us if we want to close fiscal, in this case, through 12/31/18. The reason I bring us in here is that basically tells us the last year that was closed was fiscal 17. We're actively working in fiscal 18. Okay. And excuse me, I apparently can't answer the questions properly. But what happens here is, again, you can close a fiscal year. If you don't go up to that date table and lock it down, you could have a user mistakenly pick a day and post to that prior period. Okay. Now, when that happens, it's not that it can't be corrected. It's going to manifest itself if you go back and run some reports, or even you run a current month report and you go, hey, where's this transaction? There's a case where it got posted back in a period that was technically closed, but we neglected to lock it down here within the date tables. Okay. Now, if that's the case, how can I find those? Well, let me just introduce you briefly here to let me do this. Let's go to the posted general ledger transactions. Okay. There is, you can create a report, and I've got one here that I was just working with a little bit this morning. And what the idea with this report is this. Okay? You can always set filters on a report. And knowing that the system will keep track of an effective date of a transaction, which is the day it posts to the general ledger, and also the system is going to keep track of the posted date or the physical date that something was done or entered into the system. Okay. And through the use of the filter, by using an effective and posting dates, you can basically run a report that tells you if you have any transactions that were mistakenly posted to a period after it was closed. The only thing that you need to know is this particular database, as we said, we're actively working in fiscal 18, which is January through December. Okay. So what I'm asking for is show me anything that was posted with an effective date prior to the first day of the fiscal year that's open. And then the key is to add a second filter on this posted date, which the reason I say greater than 9/1/18 is because my fiscal, in this database, the fiscal 2017, which is the last year that was closed, was literally closed on 9/1/18. So if we see anything that was posted after the day the fiscal year was closed, which was that 9/1, but had an effective date in the prior fiscal year, you can go ahead and with the use of those two filters, a little creative use of those two filters, what the system can come back and tell you is, again, and the content tab will control what you see here, but you can basically come in here and see that, oh gosh, here's this journal entry that was posted. We can see the session number that it went in on, okay? I can see that I posted it this morning, just so we would have some data on this report, but it impacted fiscal 17. And I can look and say, well, wait a minute, I've already posted to fiscal, or I've already closed fiscal 17. This is a mistake because I neglected to not lock down my dates. And what would we do in an instance like here? Well, we can go right back to the journal entry screen because we have the session ID. We've got the document number. We can use the reversal function within journal entries and reverse this particular journal entry. And what we could do is the reversal would negate this, so in and out, negate to 0. And then we could also copy this same session and copy it to the proper date. Okay? So there are ways that you can identify problems. Again, this particular report was the posted GAL transactions, and even though I'm focusing on something that got posted after a fiscal year close, the same principles can apply as far as monthly. You know, is on such and such a date I felt that I had it reconciled? Was anything posted after that point in time? And these two effective dates and posting dates can accomplish that for you. All righty. So that's kind of what I had for us this morning, guys. Just a few ideas about reconciling your subledgers to the GL and a few more tips in there about the financial statement formats. I do thank you for attending, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to reach out to me in an email, my email address is Kathy with a K, .Dwyer, DWYER, @Zobrio, ZOBRIO.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. All right, once again, thank you for attending, and we'll hope to see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. A recording of this webinar will be made available shortly.